Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 48 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. I am coming into today, rated 1768, on a win streak of 147 games. So let's hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent, playing Ivan XYZ. And we'll have King's Pawn. And we have a Sicilian, play knight to f3. And yeah, I'll go for another delayed Alapin. I played this in the most recent episode. We saw my opponent play e5 in a recent game, after which white can still play d4. Knight f6 is one of these moves that does prevent me from playing d4. And with knight f6, I'll go into this line with e5, and then pawn d4. And we've basically transposed into what I think is a mainline c3 Sicilian. And I'm pretty sure the most natural move is to take back. But there is perhaps a bit more aggressive way to play this bishop to c4, attacking the knight, developing with tempo, and then bishop to b3. And this is somewhat of a gambit. If black takes the pawn, I take back, and I'm down a pawn, but I do have a nice lead in development. And I have a bit more space with my pawn on e5. So yeah, I don't think I've studied this position specifically, but I vaguely remember that it should be very playable for white. With pawn e6, yeah, of course, black is looking to develop the darks for a bishop. So I think castling is probably the most natural. In bishop g5, there's bishop e7. Let's start with castling. I think it's very likely if black castles kingside, I'll probably want to organize a kingside attack. Black's starting with d6, which does make sense. Challenging my e5 pawn. Now there is a question how to deal with the tension. Because if I take, then bishop takes. And I'd really like to keep initiative, like knight e4. Could also play bishop to g5 here. Maybe provoke bishop e7. Actually, yeah, bishop g5, bishop e7. And then if I can take and then take, I basically win back the pawn. Let's go for this. Because I don't see a super easy way for black to respond. Black plays bishop e7, so I'll take. And this is already looking pretty good, because I'll be able to take on d6. The pawn will be supported by the queen. Black takes with a knight. It is possible my d-pawn might end up just falling at some point. But I do have knight e4. I also have knight b5. A very interesting position. Knight b5, there is castling. A pawn is very extended in black's territory. So I feel like if I play knight b5, black castles, I play knight c7, I don't think I'm really achieving much in that variation. Knight e4 seems like a slightly more solid move. And with the pawn on d6, the game is basically going to revolve around this pawn. It might come down to if I can effectively support it before black can win it. I'm considering pawn g4 here. Pawn g4, knight h4. I don't want to be weakening my king side if it's not necessary. Another idea is queen d3, simply preparing rook d1. Yeah, I'll go for this. I think this is a nice multi-purpose move. Not only am I connecting my rooks, preparing the double up, but there's also ideas of eventually creating the battery against the king side. Bishop d7. Yeah, black wants to play this. So, kind of like the idea of knight e5. I mean, visually, it does look really nice for white. I have two knights in the center. Pawn on d6. And the main point of knight e5 is basically to discourage bishop c6, because then I can take and then takes, and I should be doing well there. A c-pawn could be a target. And I'm fantasizing still about this battery. Like if I can play bishop c2 and eventually g4 and maybe set up some tactics against the king. Could start with rook d1. I guess now bishop c6 might be a bit more feasible for black, because takes, rook takes, and then there'd be 3 attackers and 3 defenders. So d6 is a very big focal point in the position. And black's played relatively quickly so far, but yeah, it's a type of position where black probably needs to take some more time. Okay, a6, preparing bishop b5. So I think I can very simply play rook e1 here. Yeah, bishop b5, and now can I swing the queen like to h3? Not too many options. Let's play queen h3. So I can't immediately play bishop c2 with a rook controlling c2, but maybe eventually bishop can help out. Knight c4 offering a trade. Also hitting a lot of things. I probably have to take that. Takes. I could take with the bishop though. I'm just not sure. Takes. The bishop's coming to d5. I could take twice. There's also d7 to throw in. Maybe at some point. Taking a moment here. Yeah, I might trade everything. And take again. I want to play bishop c2, but again, bishop d5, and I think it's, yeah, probably a better option to take. But it's kind of a tricky position to evaluate. Pawn is still chilling on d6. I don't have an easy way to generate threats on the king side. I could play rook d2. g4 is still looming. b3 comes to mind. I think I'll start with b3. Just see where the rook wants to move. I mean, if I get the chance, I might want to play d7. Like, for example, rook c2, d7. Black plays rook d4. Considering g4 here. g4. Could also take and play rook d1. Yeah, let's go for this. Do have to watch my time. Not blundering any forks, I don't think. I mean, knight e2, probably king f1. The knight could hop around. Even if it gets to d5, I'm still supporting the pawn. Goes back to f5. And now I'm going to play queen d3. I mean, as long as I can keep the pawn defended and probably advance it soon, white should be for choice here. Queen a5, okay. So now d7, might as well start with. Rook's going to move over. Have to watch out for this back rank idea. I'm wondering about queen, maybe queen c2, preparing queen c8. And rook takes e7 would be an attempt to deflect my rook, but rook d7 walks into queen c8, and then white is the one back rank mating. And the point of queen c2 is really to set up queen c8, maybe eventually play b4, try and remove the queen from defending the rook. But it's a very interesting battle. Like, it's the type of position where black wants to treat this pawn as a weakness. I want to treat it as a strength. And I'm pretty sure the pawn is still stronger than it is weak. Like, now I can safely play queen c8. And black has to defend, I believe. Really don't see any other options. Now, do I have... Rook d6 doesn't work. I wonder if I can play rook c1. Basically threatening to take, and then at rook c1 there's knight e7. It's still kind of tricky. I'm going to still go for this. I'm really just trying to set up the back rank tactics. Like, especially when you have a pawn on the 7th rank, you want to be extra aware tactically. I was trying to calculate this line. Queen c7. So offering the queen trade. Still holding on to the pawn. And if black tries this move, which attacks and defends, it looks like I have the tactic to take on d8, which maybe I can show after the game. But now it's looking nice. Supporting the pawn, attacking this pawn. I don't quite have rook c8, but I have this move. And now, yeah, rook c8 is on the horizon. Also knight b7. It's probably a cleaner threat. Get the knight to attack the rook. And I don't see how black is surviving this. Okay, I did burn a lot of time throughout this middle game to the end game, but it looks like I'm finally getting the job done. Yeah, now it's checkmate in 2. Okay, I think that was a nice instructive game. We saw a very clear theme that game, which you don't see too often. It's like a passed pawn in the middle game. And it seemed like the whole game, it just revolved around this pawn. Yeah, so this opening, it's playable for black. Engine does slightly prefer white after the trade on c3. And that's usually a good sign because engines are materialistic. So if Stockfish prefers the side that's down a pawn, then there should be more than enough compensation. But it was playable. And yeah, just going forward here, want to see if there were anything that was missed, any major improvements. But it seemed like I did what I had to do in the position. Yeah, it's very important to understand the idea of a6. I think a lot of players, maybe they see this move and they just dismiss it, but especially at this level, you have to constantly be asking yourself, what is my opponent up to and what do they want to do next move? So important to spot the tactical threat. And going forward here, yeah, it seemed like, so here, the engine likes pawn d7 immediately, hitting the rook, which I didn't play. I thought it's a bit committal. Rook c7. Oh, wow. Okay, there's a move that I completely missed, and I see the move being recommended. I don't fully understand it. Top engine move, the only winning move, is knight takes f7. How does this work? Rook takes f7? Knight g5. Looks like the knight's undefended, but the queen is stuck, blockading the d-pawn. And white's forking the rook and the pawn and threatening to take on e6. That's incredible. Yeah, it goes to show like how powerful Stockfish can be in these sort of positions. Just find these tactical ideas. Yeah, black's getting forked like all over the place. So yeah, I can't be too upset for missing that. I mean, d7, in order to play d7, you have to see the sequence of takes and then here and then eventually taking on e6. But yeah, I guess I let the advantage slip a little bit, but yeah, the pawn still proved to be quite powerful. And yeah, apparently queen b5 was a blunder. Black could have resisted a bit more with knight e7, probably preparing knight d5. And then engine says it's about equal here, so yeah, maybe it could have been a bigger fight. But yeah, nice, interesting game to start the episode. Let's keep it going. Do another. Playing Aerosmith's 1980. And I'll play Queen's Pawn. Play a Queen's Gambit declined. So bishop g5, might as well set up the elephant trap. Knight d7. I think I had one opponent fall for the elephant trap in the speedrun series, but this opponent playing in a very natural manner, knight f3. And a3, okay, so this is, I guess what we can call an anti-Cambridge Springs, where white is preemptively discouraging queen a5. If e3, I would have played the Cambridge Springs, which is one of my favorite openings against the Queen's Gambit. I don't believe this is effective anymore because of b4, and I don't have any tactics like takes or rooks defended. So I'm going to play in a more traditional Queen's Gambit declined setup, or semi-Slav setup, I guess. Usually when you have pawns on e6 and c6 against the Queen's Gambit, this is known as a semi-Slav. And with bishop d3, general rule of thumb is when there's still pawn tension, you can take, and the bishop essentially loses time having to take back. And now I'll play pawn b5. And this is a very common sequence, usually within the semi-Slav, is you take on c4, you play b5, and the eventual goal is to prepare c5. Now I'm realizing that it might be hard to get in c5 right away, because if I play a6, white does have the move b4. But then maybe I can play knight d5. Yeah, I think I maybe mixed up the move order a little bit here. Let's play a6. b4 is probably the best approach for white, which white doesn't do. So now I can play c5. And this is really the goal of the whole opening setup, is to get this nice harmony with the fianchettoed bishop, enough support on c5. Knight does a nice job attacking the bishop on d3. And yeah, going forward here, like probably queen b6 and rook d8. The only thing to watch out for is like if I play queen b6 and then b4, I guess I have knight e4 or knight d7. Yeah, let's go for this. So I'm avoiding the queen trade. I essentially want to use white's queen as fuel for my rooks coming in. Very often the queen has to kind of hide on the b file. White plays b4. So yeah, I have a decision to make because knight e4 offers a trade. So knight e4, there's takes, and I can't take with knight because of the pin, but I would take with bishop. But if I want to keep knights on the board, I can also play knight d7. Actually, not sure. Knight e4 takes. I think this is very fine. The rooks will still come in. Yeah, knight d7 maybe was a little bit more passive. And this bishop is a very nice piece in the position. It's able to influence all areas of the board. I might have the idea of queen b7 creating the battery on the long diagonal, trying to exert pressure against the knight and maybe eventually the g2 pawn. White plays queen d4. Okay. So yeah, if I trade, I don't think I'm achieving much. But queen b7 looks pretty nice. It reinforces the bishop. Yeah, this basically over-defends the bishop. So if takes, the bishop's still defended by the queen. So holding the center together. And I still want to play rook fd8 with tempo against the white queen. And this battery does a nice job of sort of tying down white's pieces, because now the bishop is essentially tied down to defending the knight, and the knight's tied down to blocking the battery against g2. So it's kind of hard for white to do much with these pieces immediately. We might see rook fd1 and then rook d8, and okay, queen will move somewhere. There might end up being some rook tension on the D and C files. But I can't complain with the position. Like, pretty solid. But it's one of these positions that you do need patience. You want to make sure everything's solid and then try and build up some small advantages. Starting with rook d8. Queen b2. And now, I guess it's a question. Do I want to trade off a pair of rooks? I could also start with h6, making some room for my king. Yeah, let's play h6. I'm expecting bishop h4. And I don't want to take too long here, mainly debating between takes or rook ac8. Choices. I'll play rook ac8. So now both rooks having a staring contest on the open files on the board. And I should note that it's like a very symmetrical pawn structure. So in such cases, usually it comes down to which side has the better pieces. In this case, it's kind of about the minor pieces. And I would like to think that black is slightly for choice, because I have the very nice bishop on e4, the queen bishop battery. This bishop is a bit passive. This bishop, it's developed, but it's not doing that much. But it will soon be a question, like, what is my plan going forward? Like, if white just waits, or yeah, like h3, bishop g3, I'll have to find some way of making progress. Or even rook d1. Like, do I want to trade rooks and go into a queen and minor piece endgame? I'm trying to imagine how these pieces can be improved. Like, do I want to play... I guess I should be considering like ideas of g5, g4. I should note that like if I kick the knight, it can move to defend g2. Like in some cases e1 or h4. So if I want to play g5, there has to be a good reason behind it. I don't want to weaken my king unless I'm getting something in return. I mean, one potential idea is to double up on the d file. Like if I play queen d7, then I basically prevent rook d1 because there's these back rank ideas. Like here, queen d7 is very possibly a candidate move. But now with the bishop on g3, okay, we do have to acknowledge that white is probably threatening rook c7, attacking the queen and bishop. So knight d5 comes to mind. Yeah, I'm going to play this and then think. This is a kind of nice multi-purpose move. It covers c7, centralizes the knight, also frees f6 for the bishop. And I was saying a few moments ago how I was thinking about ways to improve my knight and bishop. I think white is allowing me to make some progress here. Although white is also kind of doing the same thing. Kind of the nature of these sort of symmetrical positions. So, I mean, I could pin the knight. Let's start with this. Pinning the knight to the queen. Another plan of knight d5 is to eventually maneuver to b6 and maybe someday to c4, like a nice potential outpost square. White has similar ideas of knight b3 to c5 eventually, but yeah, it might be slow for white. Now f3. Okay, I think this is the first moment in the game where things are getting a bit spicy. Because f3 hits the bishop, but it leaves a pawn undefended on e3. And I can take it, then threatening the knight. I'm pretty sure my opponent just overlooked this. I don't have to move the bishop. And once I take the pawn, I hit the knight twice. The knight's still pinned. White probably doesn't have time to take the bishop, because then I take the knight, set up discoveries, also hit the queen. Yeah, this looks really, really good. So it was a tense battle kind of leading up to this moment, but I think my opponent just kind of cracked under the pressure. It kept improving, eventually got the opportunity to pounce. Now, yeah, I don't really see where this queen is going. I mean, maybe b1 or b3. Okay, if queen b3, I can take the pawn at the very least. So let's say queen b1. What is my follow-up? Like, there's no obvious discovered checks to win material. I mean, I'm already up a pawn though, so I should be very happy. But in queen b1, maybe knight f5 and then take on g3, simplify a little bit. Okay, white plays queen b3. So yeah, I think this is an easier move to figure out because I can just take on e4 and now I'm threatening mate in 1. Still have all these discovery ideas. Looks like white just missed the mate threat. Okay, just as I was about to let go, my opponent resigns. So not quite checkmate on the board. But another nice instructive game. I think, yeah, this is another example of kind of just building up pressure, keeping things solid and controlled. Just going back to this opening, yeah, a3 is not the most common move. And, actually, yeah, what I could have done against this move, I think maybe I mixed up my lines. I could have just taken on c4 and essentially transpose into a good version of some sort of Queen's Gambit accepted or Botvinnik semi-Slav. It does get sharp, like after pawn e4, pawn b5, but the engine does say this is actually preferable for black. The idea would be after pawn e5, black's not losing a piece, even though the knight's attacked and pinned, because there's a counterattack h6. And then things do get crazy, like bishop h4, g5. But I probably should have been willing to go into this. Takes, and apparently queen a5 is best. So something to keep in mind for next time. I played bishop e7. I mean, this is a system I played when I was much younger, maybe in the age of my profile picture, where I just played solid chess going into the middle game. And I do want to take a look at this moment where white could have played this move b4. It is a top engine move, but engine says it's still close to equal. It does look ugly because my bishop is blocked by the c-pawn. The c-pawn has a hard time moving. But with b4, there's kind of another idea that opens up in the position. I can start with h6, just make the bishop move, and then this idea a5 to target the pawn on b4. And then, yeah, if white defends it, I can keep attacking. After takes, knight d5. Position's roughly equal, and it would be a game. There are cases where if takes, I know this structure looks ugly with this bishop, but there's a nice idea to plant the knight on c4, have a nice outpost on the queen side. And then the b-pawn is probably a long-term liability for white, because the bishop is always staring at it. If trade, the queen is staring at it. And yeah, the knight's coming to c4, rook is potentially coming to a4. So yeah, this could have been just another possible direction of the middle game. But going back to what happened in the game, yeah, it was very stable position, very solid. One of these symmetrical positions where I think I just had slightly better pieces. And then white made this one blunder, pawn f3. There is the famous quote by Ben Feingold, never play f3. Definitely applies to this specific position. So if white played maybe a more solid move, bishop f1, defending g2, then it would be a longer fight. But I'll take the win, and I'm up to 1785. So let's do one more. Okay, next opponent, playing Shaxrat 63. And this time we have a king's pawn. And what do I want to play? Let's play a good old Italian. Bishop c5, c3, d6. Okay, so the main move is knight f6, which could potentially lead into the Molar attack. With d6, I think I can just play d4 right away, and this should be a already good version for white, because there's no knight attacking the pawn on e4. So I'm not gambiting anything, and I can develop very naturally. It's a type of position that sometimes you see from a Ponziani, where, yeah, white's just taking over the center very quickly. Black was maybe scared of knight g5 there. I'm going to play a move, just taking a moment here, but there's a very typical move to play here to prevent black's idea of bishop g4. It's very simply h3. There are cases where sometimes this move is not necessary, but I think in this case, h3 just deprives black of the only decent square for the bishop. Black's still playing pretty quickly, pawn a6. Let's just castle. The bishop doesn't have a really active square to go to. If bishop e6, I'll have pawn d5 with a fork. And yeah, with queen e7, man, this is looking really, really good. After knight d5, attacking the queen, hitting the bishop, I might be able to damage black's queenside structure. This is also a pawn sacrifice. If takes, I would have rook e1. So black retreats. And now, yeah, I'm looking for ways to punish black. I mean, I want to play queen b3, but the problem is knight to a5. Yeah, I'm not quite in time to get tactics against f7 in that line. I mean, the simple move is just to take the bishop before it can retreat. And that's probably what I'll end up doing. Anything else to consider? I mean, I could actually take and then queen b3. Okay, let's start by taking. I'm still calculating. Takes queen b3, knight a5. I take on f7, king f8. And then my queen's attacked. If I move to d5, there's knight f6. So it's very possible queen b3 could actually backfire. As much as I want to play the move. Queen b3, knight a5, queen a4 doesn't really do much. So yeah, let's keep it simple. I'll just develop. When in doubt, just keep developing, put your pieces on good squares. And hopefully eventually there will be some tactics. Black still can't actively develop the bishop because of pawn d5. Although maybe it's possible bishop e6, pawn d5, knight a5. It looks questionable for black though. I should take a moment. Queen b3, knight a5. I still don't think it works, because takes king f8. My queen has to move away from defending the bishop. I could play rook e1. I'm considering pawn d5. Just a way to hit the knight. I think pawn d5 is probably the most aggressive move. The idea would be, if the knight moves back, I can play pawn e5 and really just try and open the center before black can develop. Yeah, I'm going to go for this. Because e5 is in my control. Knight e5, I would win a pawn. And if knight a5, then very simply I can play bishop to d3. And now I'm threatening pawn b4 to trap the knight, which black deals with. Okay, so now if pawn b4, there's knight c4. Interesting. Didn't quite see that. I do have pawn e5. Well, that might be a sacrifice. Yeah, I'm really looking for ways to punish black's whole setup. I might just play b3. Like very simple prophylaxis, prevent knight c4, just try and maintain control in the position. Yeah, because pawn b4, knight c4, the knight kind of slips away. With pawn b3, the knight has a hard time re-entering the game. And I still have like very nice central control. So rather than going for tactics, I'm just going for positional domination. Black is maybe preparing this move. So yeah, how can I improve further? Still considering pawn e5, takes and takes. Knight d4 comes to mind. Rook c1 comes to mind. I think I'll play rook c1. It's the only open file in the position. There might be ideas of queen c2 to c7. And if I can trade queens, or just plant the queen here, I'll be threatening to win the pawn. I could also try and attack on the king side. Like bishop b1, queen d3, and then e5 is an idea. Yeah, I'm going to play bishop b1 first. I like the prospect of queen d3. Although if I play this and this, there would be bishop f5. So the plan might be to play queen d3, knight d4, and then eventually e5 to unleash the queen bishop battery. But first things first, I'll save the bishop. Yeah, and even though it was like a very good opening for me, my opponent is not going down easily. It seems like they've done a good job at fending off my threats, not blundering, and yeah, I don't think this is this a move? Takes? Maybe this is a move, actually. Just as I say, my opponent's not blundering. I think it might be a free pawn here. Takes. Bishop takes, I take the rook on f8. And then just have to make sure there's no like strong attack. Do I want to go for that though? Takes, 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 bishop takes g2. It actually looks a little bit iffy. I'm going to play knight d4. Not 100% sure. I'm getting low on time, so I think I just want to follow the strategy I've been doing of just trying to be solid. Maybe eventually I can win the d-pawn when it's a bit more clear. I just didn't like the lines where the bishop sacks and the knight comes into f4, and it was probably okay, but trying to play practical chess. So rook c8. Maybe now queen h5. Or maybe I can take... Start by taking. We'll see how black recaptures. Queen takes. So now if I take... Again, there's some small annoyances, but I don't think the piece sack is that powerful. I think this is actually a bit more clean. If takes, I take, and then takes, and I'll have plenty of defenders. Queen helps out, the bishop also helps. So we might see rook d8 or rook e8. So now, yeah, queen f3. Now I can probably start looking to attack on the king side, try and make some threats. 95. So if queen g3, I could have taken, but I think there's more upside to keeping my bishop. And the knight's attacked. And there's really not too many safe squares the knight can move to. And black could try and defend or move back to g6. And if the knight moves back, then maybe I can play pawn e5, unleashing this bishop, cementing this bishop. Pawn f6 is played. Well, now I can play f4. Just making sure. I was really just looking for ways like black can try and counterattack. Even though the queen is controlling the open file, I'm controlling all the squares on the file. Like even c3 is covered. So there's no infiltration squares. And this knight is still out of play. Oh, knight f7. I kind of forgot about that. Okay, I can play bishop a3. And reposition to b2. And everything seems to be harmonizing pretty well here. And if I play bishop b2, then bishops are placed very nicely to probably help the pawn expansion in the center. And then the eventual mating ideas on the king side. And meanwhile, like black's pieces are so restricted. King h8. Bishop b2 first. Yeah, I could also play rook c1. I could also play queen g6. Maybe queen g6 is the way to go. This move didn't initially come to mind, but I think it's the most direct, threatening to take the knight, also threatening to play e5 and create the battery. Well, this is a free rook. I was about to play e5 to threaten mate, but yeah, I might as well take the rook first. And plenty of time. I did use most of my time, but it was time well spent. We'll see if my opponent allows a checkmate. And they do. Yeah, this can be easy to miss, like the bishop on b1, helping support the queen. So another pretty clean game. I think all the games today were like nice, clean, solid games, pretty well controlled. Maybe all the games I got lower on time, but tried to use my time to play accurate and strong moves. So yeah, with this opening, I mean, got a really nice position. And this is why, yeah, black should play knight f6 to start. Let me try and regain my voice. Oh no, my voice. I'm glad this happened after the game and not during the game. What was I saying? Yeah, knight f6 is the main line here. And I did see a comment on one of the recent speedruns. There's a question asking why I stopped playing the Molar attack. The Molar attack is a variation after takes, bishop b4, knight c3 takes. It's basically a gambit for white, which I was probably going to go into if my opponent played this line. And there is a lot of theory here. Castling takes, pawn d5, main move is bishop to f6. I used to play this a lot growing up, like basically between the ratings of 1200 to 1800. The reason why I gradually stopped playing this variation in more serious chess is because if black knows the theory, then it's very hard for white to get an advantage. And against very strong players who know the theory very deeply, after rook e1, knight e7, takes pawn d6, bishop g5, like the theory goes on for probably about 20 moves to start the game. What is it? H6, queen e2 takes, rook e1, bishop e6 takes. Basically, if the opponent knows how to get to this position, black is objectively better. And it's one of the reasons why I don't play the Molar attack against very strong players online or in tournament chess. But for this speed run, not too many people actually know the theory. As we saw in this game, they deviate very early. So it's a nice opening weapon. And even if the opponent does know the theory, it's still playable. It's just, it's nice to have backup options in your opening repertoire. So, okay, that was a bit of a tangent, but hopefully clears up a question from one of the commenters from the earlier episode. But if we go back to what happened in this game, yeah, my opponent just gave me the whole center, and life was very good. There were some moments that I really wanted to punish my opponent more quickly. Like, I was looking at queen b3, but yeah, I didn't see how this works. Knight a5 takes, king f8, and the engine wants to play queen d3 here, and okay, white has compensation, but there's no need to go for this. Just played solid developing moves, played d5, and yeah, I think it was all pretty smooth. I should look at this moment. Yeah, I kind of chickened out of taking on d6. Engine says, yeah, this is the best option by far, but I wasn't 100% sure about bishop takes h3, bishop takes f8, bishop takes g2, and then takes, and then knight f4. Engine just puts the king on g3. Yeah, I guess the knight restricts the queen from coming in, and yeah, this would have been totally fine. But I played in a safer manner, and it still eventually paid off. So, okay. Yeah, some nice games today. Hopefully some lessons for the viewers to take away. Hope you guys enjoyed the content. As always, if you do like the content, you can subscribe. It does help the channel. And if you have questions, leave them below, and I'll see you guys soon.